Yeah, thank you very much for the nice welcome. And yeah, I'm very happy to see all of you here. And I am pretty sure that we will have a very interesting conversation over the next couple of minutes. I need to apologize that Kirsten Hasberg couldn't make it. She was traveling from Copenhagen to Hamburg and realized that there's very stormy weather with some very heavy wind coming up, and she couldn't have made it back to Hamburg today, to Copenhagen today, so she couldn't make it. But this gives us the opportunity to include you all even more than we planned already. So, as you know, our topic is, can blockchain fix digital? And we want to, in the first phase of our talk a little bit later, want to discuss about what has to be fixed. So if you grab one of these papers and take a pen, I will distribute some here already, and you will have some there as well. So please distribute. Here's pen and paper. So write down what you think is broken in the web, what needs to be fixed at the end. When I prepared this talk, I was, of course, looking around, okay, what are the topics we should touch upon? And I'm very happy that Jo Lubin, founder of one of the co-founders of Ethereum and the founder of Consensus, is today here to discuss about us. And of course, I had an eye on what he is doing with his company, what is going on there. And I found something for me very surprising, that when the Consensus Europe was founded in Ireland, they had the day when it is founded, I think even, they had an event together with the Institute of International European Affairs. And that was under the topic, blockchain, what is it? And how can it fix the internet? So basically the same topic we have today. And as a start, I would like to, no, it doesn't work here. Okay, not the internet is broken, my PC is broken. Okay, so that session, what they had in Ireland, end of May this year, started with a very nice video from BBC explaining what Bitcoin is. And I want to start with this short video, around 2 minutes, and after this I will have a very brief explanation how I see what blockchain is and what is the main benefit of blockchain. So, let's start with the video.
When you want to buy something normally, using your normal bank card, this is what happens. I give my card details to the shop asks the bank if I'm good for the money. The bank checks its records to see if I've got enough in my account. If I do, it lets the shop know. It updates its records to show the movement of money from my account to the shop's. Oh, and it takes a little cut for its trouble. Now, if you wanted to remove the bank from that system, who else would you trust to keep those records and not alter them or cheat in any way? Well, I wouldn't trust you. I wouldn't trust you. In fact, I wouldn't trust any single person, but I might trust everyone. The idea is you don't have a central record of transactions. Instead, you distribute many, many copies of this ledger around the world. Each owner of each copy records every transaction. So, to buy something using cryptocurrency, I give the shop my details. The shop asks all the bookkeepers if I'm good for the money. The bookkeepers all check their records to see if I have enough. If I do, they tell the shop, and then all update their records to show the movement of money. So there's no way that a forged transaction can make it in. If I try to alter a ledger, it won't match all of the other copies, and it gets rejected. Oh, and one of them, at random, will be given a reward of some newly created cryptocurrency. This is how cryptocurrencies work. And remember, all of these bookkeepers, all of these ledgers, they're not actually people, they're computers. Lots of computers.
I'm not sure whether it's the end of the video, but let's stick there and go further in the presentation. So I hope you enjoyed and understood a little bit more what blockchain is. That was basically the idea behind the first cryptocurrency based on blockchain technology. That was Bitcoin, and with a brief explanation about Bitcoin and afterwards about Ethereum, I would like to start the session. So first of all, what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin was the first digital money, as said, based on blockchain technology. And here you can read everything you need to know about Bitcoin. That is the white paper of Bitcoin. Basically just 8 pages, no more. And there it is explained how it does work. And what's quite interesting is to understand the intention behind blockchain, behind Bitcoin. Why has it been built? And if you start reading the paper, you see that the intention was very clear to establish a system which enables anybody to send a value, in this case the Bitcoin, from one point to another without any intermediary. That was in the time of the financial crisis, and the target was very clearly to reduce the dependency of the banks and so forth. So what is blockchain technology? Basically, okay, it's a little bit delay here. The technology which enables, or the set of technologies which enables Bitcoin is basically nothing else but a decentralized data structure which allows the participants at this data structure to directly transfer to each other and store the state and the history of all participants' transactions. Yeah? So it's a very easy, understandable explanation, but this is in core basically what blockchain is about. So it is not, as you saw in the video, on just one ledger, it is on a lot of ledgers. And because all the ledgers or the computers are synchronized with a couple of technological combinations, it is secured that it cannot be tampered with. So I will not go in too much details because I know a couple of people who are here in the room that would be even boring for them. Others, they don't want to understand too much, so you don't need to understand everything. What you need to understand is what is the benefit out of this. And what is happening here is that finally, after we had the internet in the first phase, we used it for communication, then we had the interaction. Now we have the possibility to use the web with this special layer of blockchain to make direct transactions. Just 2 charts on a little bit of detail. So what are the characteristics of blockchain? It is peer-to-peer, like I just explained. You have the transparency of the story. You have got encryption in place. You can have a kind of programmed privacy, depend on the use case you're looking for. And then a power pack, which is extremely important. You cannot censor, or the transactions cannot be censored, and the total system is basically immutable. Yeah? So that is the huge development which had been done with Bitcoin, with the invention of a person or a group with the name of Satoshi Nakamoto. And there are a couple of benefits, especially if we look at the business side. So here more the business people. So we want to talk about both the private scenario and the business scenario here as well. So first of all, blockchain enables disintermediation. So that there you can increase the efficiency and so forth. You can reduce the systematic risk. You have more security and a huge potential in the automation of processes. A lot of things are under development. Every day, basically, the community learns more and more what can be done. And what's most important to my understanding, every day and every week, you see new proof of concept, new systems really going live based on blockchain technology. A statement I very much like as well is from Adam Draper. He said the blockchain basically does one thing. It replaces third-party trust with a mathematical proof that something happened. Now let's take a look at Ethereum. Ethereum was really, for me, the breakthrough of the usage of blockchain in the business area, because blockchain is basically the next step. Ethereum is basically the next step of blockchain technology. It's a kind of world computer. Vitalik Buterin, a young Canadian, originally with some roots in Russia, he had the idea, after he studied Bitcoin and worked in the Bitcoin space for quite a time, he had the idea that it is a little bit too short thought, that you just have one item tracked on this blockchain, which is a Bitcoin. He said if you would include a Turing-complete program language into a system like Bitcoin, then you could program any kind of asset, and then you could really have a kind of world computer where synchronized programs secure that the status of the program is a kind of truth. This kind of programs he named smart contracts and built with a team, and Jo Lubin was one of the co-founders of Ethereum. They started then to build Ethereum. And by this, you have kind of unstoppable applications. What does it mean? That they cannot be censored, like I explained before, and there cannot be any kind of downtimes also. And you have basically programs which exactly run as they have been programmed. Just very briefly about smart contracts, that is almost completing my explanation after this final statement from Vitalik Buterin. The smart contracts is neither a smart, not a contract, or neither smart, not a contract. It is basically a smart way to execute parts of contract. So basically parties agree upon that parts of their agreement are programmed and in a kind automated. That means that they define what kind of external sources would change the status of a program. For instance, if a delay of a flight is happening, then the information is sent to this contract and the status might be changed, that for instance a compensation is paid to the customer and that kind of things. And you have the benefit that you can even include the regulatory oversight into these processes. Vitalik Buterin himself says his one-sentence definition of smart contract is that a smart contract is a computer program that directly controls any kind of assets. Basically, that was my brief introduction to blockchain. Of course, we will discuss more in depth now together with our two panelists here. And yeah, I welcome very much Jo Lubin from Consensus and Sam Liban from the Sun Protocol to the stage. Give a very warm welcome to them, please. So you both arrived from far away, I think, here to Hamburg. From where did you come to Hamburg?
I forget.
Okay, think about it.
Singapore.
From Singapore, okay. So that is really a long distance trip. And you came from?
From Bamako in Mali, West Africa.
Okay. So we'll come back to this. I know you're both very busy people, and I really was very happy to have you here. And I would like to start first of all that you explain a little bit about what are you doing basically, and then in the next round I want to touch upon, okay, what are the problems we have. So Jo, please start, explain a little bit. Most of the people will know you very well, but perhaps the one or other not.
Sure. So after working on the Ethereum project for a year, it became clear that we were about to release version 1 of the platform, and there weren't a lot of people building at the application layer of Ethereum. So I started a company called Consensus, gathered some people together with the idea of building a venture production studio, essentially building projects, companies, at the application layer. We started building a few things and realized it was very difficult to build with no developer tools in an ecosystem that didn't yet exist and on a platform that wasn't actually released. So we were building on early versions of the platform. So we started building things like dApp Store and accounting systems, and the people building those components ended up needing to build their own developer tools and identity components, just because we realized pretty early on that we're going to need a different way to log into these systems, because it was clear that username password mechanisms were broken, amongst other things on the internet that were broken. And so we built developer tools. Truffle Suite has been downloaded about 1 million times at this point, and we built other kinds of infrastructural elements, so MetaMask enabling software to be released as just a URL in a browser. Early on in the ecosystem, if you wanted somebody to use your decentralized application, you'd have to tell them to first go to the Ethereum website or GitHub and download the client and sync the client to the public blockchain. 3 days later or 8 hours later, you can
very well remember the time.
Exactly. And so that wasn't viable for a decentralized application platform. So we built lots of the infrastructure that enables this early phase of adoption for Ethereum. And Ray Valdez at Gartner, when he was at Gartner, estimated that the Ethereum developer ecosystem is about 40 times larger than number 2, which is IBM's Fabric ecosystem. And I think we're probably a lot larger now than when he made the estimate, because things have been growing exponentially. So fast forward 3 3/4 years ago, we started building a venture production studio. We started getting calls from companies and governments to explain blockchain and build proofs of concept for them. And so we have that first prong of activity, which is product, and we build core components and lots of networked business models, different attempts at building platform, protocol-based open platforms, a bunch of consulting work for companies and governments and central banks. So that's prong number 2 of what Consensus is, and we've done some exciting work around the world. We do a lot of educational work, so we started early on teaching people in government and enterprise, and we continue to need to do that, and we've combined that with our need to hire people and train people. And so Consensus Academy has trained about 1,500 software developers and lots of lawyers with continuing legal education courses and many other kinds of learners. And we do a bunch of capital markets activities also. So from the foundations, building custody systems so that people and institutions can securely custody their private keys, to atomic swap protocols, to financial instruments, to venture investing in over 30 companies at this point, and token launching as well, whether it's a consumer utility token, which was recently pretty much accepted by the SEC in the United States as a new kind of construct where people can collectively work together and deliver value, as well as security or investor tokens.
When did you found Consensus?
So it was around October, November 2014, but it took quite a while to actually
was quite busy in that time, right?
Yeah, so I was mostly focusing on Ethereum at that point.
Okay, thank you very much. So Sam, explain a little bit about what you are doing. You're running a breathtaking program, project as well, I think.
Well, yeah. Hi, my name is Sam. I'm one of 3 founders of the Sun Protocol. I'm more ideology driven. So in terms of what the blockchain means, in terms of providing freedom, so what drives me is the idea, or our vision is to use the technology to create self-determined, community-driven economies on the scale of African villages. Yeah. And the Sun protocol at the moment is actually all the steps and validation points it takes to get there, because you don't have energy, you don't have access to the internet, you have a lot of issues. So I just came back from Bamako, where we opened the first, not the first, but where I was invited to see the opening of our solar power stations, 3 of them being activated in villages, so producing internet, producing electricity and internet. And so that is the first stage. And why? Because I think that we oversee in our saturated markets that new technology actually has a much greater impact in other regions than here, right? And I think we're wasting technology arguing if we need a bank or if we need Bitcoin, if we can solve true problems in other regions. And so we used to write SMS to give us some information back and forth. SMS is the basis of M-Pesa, mobile money. Today, 40% of the gross domestic product, Bruttosozialprodukt in German, 40% in Kenya is transacted in M-Pesa. That is impact of technology. Yeah? We use messenger like WhatsApp to write us about where our kids are or whatever, yeah? Or to come to the date or whatever. In Shanghai, I think Joe knows much better than I because he's more in Asia than I am, but WeChat and Alipay are complete systems that are complete ecosystems. You cannot transact anymore. The first hotels are starting to give people, Europeans and Americans, telephones because they need the apps to transact, to get a cab, to pay for something. So again, a technology that we understood and understand and that we use for a certain kind of niche has a complete different impact when it is used in an environment where there are no legacy systems, right? Because we are so saturated, we have a lot of legacy systems. And because we have legacy systems, we have very valid interests of parties that do not want change. It's normal. If I'm making money with it, why should I change it? Why? So for me, all of this and the love for what I've seen in Bitcoin and in Ethereum, the virtual machine on a blockchain, for me that all meant or means we live in a time where we have access to technologies with which we can really change the world. It's not only blockchain, it's also renewables, right? I mean, here in Hamburg, you probably have people with solar panels on their roof, in a city where it rains almost as much as in London. And down in sub-Saharan Africa, electricity is being produced with diesel generators, with 1950s MAN diesel generators for up to 300,000 people for a city with diesel generators shipped, you know? I mean, it's so crazy. So I for myself, I couldn't stand it anymore, and so if you want to change something, you have to do something. So the Sun protocol is actually all the validation points, and we validated creating energy, we validated the internet access just now, and so the next step is actually creating a true blockchain community-wide, village by village, and letting people decide if they want to interact globally.
So I think we could, please give. It was obvious that this is a project by heart from your side. I think we should come back to these even more important topics later on. Let us now come back to situation here. So of course I thought over whom to have on the panel. No question about you, because I could. Yeah. So if you're on the panel, that's simply great. It's really an honor. Sam, I wanted to have here because I know that he's running that project by heart, but he has a clear attitude and an extreme in-depth knowledge about all the ecosystem in different blockchain areas. And I know that you will heavily contribute as well to the, let's say, first world problems as well, yeah? So let's, for the time being, speak about this, but of course, please put your questions, yeah, and give it over here so we can later take a look at it and discuss about these as well. So, Jo, you at the beginning said already, yeah, we obviously have a problem with the username password. Yeah, in the world of let's say non-blockchain. Yeah, could we gather a couple of further points? What is broken in the web today?
So you may have heard one or two talks of mine in the past.
I did. Yeah, I think even 15 or 16.
Yeah. One thesis is that. The web, as it's currently constituted, as it was always constituted, is either incomplete or broken. It's incomplete in that it never supported natively digital money or natively digital assets, digitally scarce assets. And perhaps more importantly, it never had a healthy identity construct. And so username and password is a mechanism that's not very well architected to safeguard people, but that's a sort of separate issue. The biggest issue is that without the presence of a healthy identity construct, we left it to corporations to create identity to serve business models, their own business models. And I think it worked well for a while. As in the early days of the web, it connected the world much better, enabled people to reach out and speak to old friends, and enabled much greater efficiencies on systems like LinkedIn, and Google's just an amazing resource. But technology has grown so powerful that these companies that as their business model treat us as products are now able to enhance the value of those products by scouring data from around the world and interacting with us with everything we do in their systems, and developing a greater understanding of who or what we are as products, and therefore raising the price that they can sell us for. And much more insidious, they understand how we operate, they understand our instincts, our evolutionary characteristics, and they make use of mechanisms that are pretty well understood by certain technologists and psychologists, and essentially they can addict us to their systems, or otherwise manipulate us to do things in their systems. And one effect of that is that they can sell us more often. These people are not evil people. They're generally pretty good people. They feel like they've been, in the Silicon Valley Bay Area, they feel like they've been pioneering technology and making the world a better place. But they're corporations, and they have a responsibility to maximize profits for their shareholders. One very unfortunate negative externality of that is that they are exploiting people and hurting people. And so Web 3.0, decentralized World Wide Web, enables people to establish, amongst many things, it enables people to establish their self-sovereign identity, the root of their identity on a public blockchain. We at Consensus have a project called UPort, which is part of the Decentralized Identity Foundation, implementing the Decentralized Identity Specification. I can be fully in control of my blockchain-based identity. I control it from my side of the browser. We have an associated personal data locker so that I can encrypt the information that I care about. I can selectively and granularly disclose it in situations that I designate if I want to monetize it or if I want to lend it to, de-identify it and lend it to a research study, then I can do that. That's up to me.
When do you think the time point will be that the people say, oh, today I'm not logging in with my Facebook account, I'm logging in with my Uport account? Do you see any, or is it a scenario you even don't see out of whatever reason? But yeah.
So Uport does enable single sign-in to applications, so it is a replacement for signing in with your Facebook or your Google ID. It's a replacement for Web 2 applications or Web 3 applications. There's a conversation that's getting underway in society about the benefits and the pitfalls of Web 2.0. GDPR is partially driving that, and Cambridge Analytica and Facebook got together to help us understand what's happening out there a little bit better. And we speak with lots of people in the Bay Area and hire lots of people in the Bay Area, and those engineers want to wake up in the morning and be excited about what they're doing, like they have for the last decade or so, but they're starting to question what it is they're actually doing, and so we're seeing a lot of people move into the Web 3.0 space. I don't know exactly when society will come to conclusions. There are lots of discussions that need to be had, and it's blockchain is very immature still. It's not scalable. It doesn't have sophisticated and adequate privacy and confidentiality on the public blockchain. We're doing a pretty good job on that in private permission blockchains, and we're moving that technology very quickly to public blockchain. But the web took quite a while to ramify, and this technology will take a while to ramify too.
Okay, but you're believing that it is going in this direction?
I'm a very big optimist, yes.
Okay.
And just from what we see on a daily basis, it is growing astonishingly, exponentially. It is overwhelming how much interest there is in building out the infrastructure, or trying to use the infrastructure. If any of you remember 1200 baud modems or 14.4
I have
modems,
the age, I do remember. Yeah,
I mean, I dialed a phone and put the phone on a modem. It made phone sounds, and things were very slow, but we appreciated what we could do with the technology. It's going to be a transition. We're going to be frustrated in the early days as we have to wait too long to buy our CryptoKitty or something like that. But the power of the technology, the societal transformation that it promises, is it's something that's inevitable, I think.
I can explain a brief story about CryptoKitties. Sebastian, you know what comes now, ne? So there's one of our best customers, so we have a very good contact, a company called Certivation. They had the goal to put the certificates on the blockchain, and they had even the goal to put it on the public Ethereum blockchain, to have the highest...
We do that with education certificates and other things.
Yeah, I know, for instance, with Frankfurt School, I think you just started a project. And so we programmed this. And I was in Cologne at the railway station, and I received a phone call of the programmer. And he asked me, do you know about CryptoKitties? That was, I think, November last year. And I said, of course. I read this on some blogs, and I said, yes, I know. It's a funny thing. Yeah, you will not like it anymore after I tell you the following. You know what comes. No? We calculated with what? 17 cents for a transaction? And it was within a day, $5, something like that. So we took our learnings as well, yeah. So that is, of course, early stage. No? Everything is early stage.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, technologists have been maxing out scalability for many decades. Software engineers always use as much bandwidth or memory or screen real estate or CPU as they can. So we should expect to bump up against the limits of the system over and over, and we need those events to happen because we learned a lot about what pieces we can tweak, different architectures for different applications. So it's a very valuable event.
Exactly. If you have got that really perfect customers.
But also, the network worked perfectly through all of that.
Yes.
Some people said CryptoKitties broke Ethereum. So that's like saying
it's the other way around,
Rush
I think.
Hour broke Uber or a ride-sharing company. It adapted beautifully. You're supposed to pay more when the system gets a little stressed.
And Certivation stayed very calm. And it was an early stage, so it was not a drama, let's say, like this. And at the end, it worked out very fine. So thank you again, Sebastian and team, of course. So back to you, Sam. Self-sovereign identity and all the situation as we have today with the Facebook and Google, or the GAFA in German, we say GAFA, G-A-F-A, yeah, so it's GAFA, yeah. Do you say the same in the US, GAFA? Or?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, so it's the abbreviation of Google, Amazon,
okay.
Facebook, and Apple, GAFA. So German pronunciation. So how do you?
I think it's called FANG.
FANG.
FANG in the Western world, which is just a better image than GAFA.
Okay, good. So I learned something more. So Sam, how do you see it? How this will evolve? Do you see? Or do you have any opinion that even Google, Facebook is working on ways and finding them to even utilize the potential of blockchain to protect their business or even to strengthen their business? Or is it something you need to think about? And I first put another question.
No, it's okay. Generally, I think first of all, I think there will be different kind of solutions for identity. Yeah? Let's call it digital identity, right? So what is the representation of me, right? And what is a unique representation of me? The data, yeah, my data. And so the question is, I think in regions like the US, I think there's less trust culturally in institutions of the government than there is in Europe. Yeah, so I think there will be at least two different kind of sets. I think the U.S. or U.S.-like libertarian. I know you don't like me talking about libertarianism.
If it's a short statement, Sam.
Yeah. No. So I think more libertarian kind of driven communities or societies or networks will go for a self-sovereign identity, like Uport will probably be able to provide. But I think that maybe in societies like Germany, actually the government could be enabled or could be asked to provide it. I mean, if you have children, you know that now, after about a couple of weeks when your child is born, it gets a unique tax number, right? So the first thing the kid gets is a tax number, and it's supposed to be for all his life. So it's a unique identifier, full stop. Yeah. So and I think if we can trust our governments, this is also changing in Germany. It's not the same like the 80s anymore. But if we can still trust our governments, then I think the governments would be a construct like the German government would be a great institution to actually generate the let's call it the Genesis ID. Yeah, the Genesis key of an ID, and to ensure it. I mean, they do with our passports all these numbers anyway. Yeah, so why? Yeah, so I think these are two viable things. And the third, of course, is what we have in China. Yeah, with the idea of a scoring model for each citizen. Yeah, which is in a certain ways scoring identities, right? And China, I think, is just very open. I think these scoring models are everywhere anyway, right? So Allianz and in Germany, Schufa, yeah, is like a cooperative of all German banks since the 1920s, and they actually store every single credit we ever did, right? So the scoring data is everywhere anyway. We focus on China because it's easier ideology. But if we take China as an example, so there's also a big risk if a centralized institution actually has control over our digital identity. then it can control us completely. I mean, really fully. I mean, now in China already you cannot fly or you cannot use a train if there are certain scoring issues you have, right? So
that's not true yet.
It's not true yet?
No,
Okay, that's the plan.
The plan.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. But there you see which ramifications this can have depending on who's in control of the data. So I think the libertarian, or however you call it, the idea of self-sovereign identity, so that we ourselves are responsible, is probably the most secure. But we have to admit that self-responsibility, or I don't know a better word, it's not that easy. People don't want full control. I mean, we have to be honest about it. We have a society where you can vote, right? So what do people do? They look at faces and they vote faces, right? They don't go into the subjects. They don't care if, it's too complex. So they look at the face and 2 or 3 kind of great sentences, and then they decide who to vote, because they don't want to go too deep into it. So I think complexity is something that makes self-responsibility very hard. And I think the magic, or the real focal point that what we have to focus on, or actually more Joe and developers he knows, or people like him, focus on simplicity. How can we simplify a secure system? And that's, at the moment, is still kind of, there's a trade-off always. So I think if we make the trade-off well, then we can create self-sovereign identities. If we don't get the trade-off well, then it will either be corruptible, or it will not be used by people because it's too complex, just like our democracies.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right on that. These systems are difficult to use for normal people. They're based on public key cryptography, where you have a number that you've got to keep secret, and another number derived from that number that can represent an address that you can send money to, or send money from. That address can also represent one aspect of your identity, and you control it from that private number. Our UPort project is working on ways to make it so normal people can use it. Do things like key revocation and key recovery. You shouldn't, if you lose your phone, you shouldn't lose your identity and all of your digital assets. And we're getting there. We have social recovery mechanisms that can enable a set of friends or lawyers, or maybe a government agency to help you recover the root of your identity. It's important to understand that self-sovereign identity is not incompatible with state-issued identity. I should control the root of my identity, but many other systems should have knowledge of who I am, and identity in those systems should confer certain rights or privileges. And a government institution can look at my identity on the blockchain, look at my face, and attest to the fact that I'm a citizen, or I'm licensed to drive for a certain period of time. We, in Zug in Switzerland, our UPort project has actually implemented that. It's not heavily used right now, but government or citizens can access government services, and recently voted in a plebiscite. It's going to get really interesting. Technology is moving really quickly, so that we shouldn't have to give the bouncer at a bar our address and our birth date when we just want to go in and have a drink. We should be able to very selectively disclose information in certain situations. The first phase of that will have attestation services that can provide those attestations for us. And the second phase is happening very quickly. It's based on a certain kind of cryptography that encrypts data so that it keeps the same shape as the plain text version of the data, and you can run computations on the encrypted data just the same way you can run computations on the plain text data. You can get, if you have privileges, you can get the same answers. So you could calculate somebody's age, or you can ask a question like, does this person have in excess of 200,000 euro in their bank account? And without revealing actual data, you can get answers to those questions. So that's the kind of world that I think will treat us all a lot better.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was an interesting discussion on identity. I would step away a little bit from identity to look at other fields as well. So most probably in the US as well, fake news is a huge topic. Yeah. So which information we can trust, filter bubble, all that kind of things. So how can blockchain support there? I looked again I didn't do this for a couple of months. I don't know how long about your ventures. It is really an impressive list. Meanwhile, yeah, your ventures, yeah, more than 40, if I calculated right, and one is Civic, for instance, yeah, which is
Civil.
Oh, Civil. Sorry. So that I think is one of the projects looking at this area. So let's touch upon how can blockchain help journalism to.
Sure. So. Going back to what we were talking about with respect to Facebook and other entities, it is to their business advantage to keep us in echo chambers, to have us seeing all the things that we believe already to be true. It makes us happy. We keep clicking more on conspiracy theory videos or pictures of cats, whatever we happen to like the most. So that's one aspect of how journalism over the last few decades has broken down. In the U.S. in 1900, there were 500 cities that had local newspapers, 2 or more local newspapers. As I understand it now, there are less than 10. Local news is being decimated, and private equity firms, hedge funds are buying up all the news properties and feeding the same sorts of stories into the population and not really adequately informing the population. We end up developing non-subtle understandings of issues because we're just being fed things that confirm our biases already. So it's resulted in polarities in politics around the world. And with blockchain systems and self-sovereign identity, reputation systems, liquid democracy tools, and quadratic voting systems, we have this decentralized architecture that will enable us to experiment with better forms of governance. Better forms of governance require good information. And so maybe the most important project at Consensus right now is Civil. Civil's a platform for sustainable and ethical journalism. Sustainable in the sense that we need to find new, better business models so that journalists can make a good living delivering important information to civilians. Ethical in the sense that a whole bunch of professional journalists are putting together topical, regionally focused newsrooms and attaching them to this Civil platform. The Civil platform is run by a foundation. Vivian Schiller, who is running PBS, CEO of PBS in the United States, it's public broadcasting. She's the chairman, I guess, of that foundation. And it's a mechanism that has a constitution that specifies ethical behavior, and that constitution will evolve based on the wishes, the votes of all the participants of the system. If you want to be part of the system, you put up a stake in the form of the Civil token. The Civil token launch is happening right now, and you can attach your newsroom to the system. You've got to define a charter for your newsroom and specify who the different journalists are. If you're deemed to be operating unethically by your readership or listenership, they can challenge your security bond on the platform, and if they demonstrate that you have acted unethically, you can be penalized or bumped off the platform. And that's just one of the first mechanisms of the Civil platform.
Impressive, thank you very much. So let's jump to a little bit more to the regulation area. So I found on the website of Next two, not only these two, but I want to point out two very interesting blog post by Martin Recke from Sina Schrader. So Sina Schrader, as you all know, is a co-organization organizer of NEXT. One is called Digital Fix Digital, and the other one is how decentralization could fix digital. And there I found some remarkable statements. So, for instance, he spoke about a book published by Andrew Keen, his latest book with the title "How to Fix the Future." And Andrew there mentions there are 5 bullets or bullet points for fixing the future. He's speaking about government or legal regulation, competitive innovation, social responsibility by citizens, we touched upon this one already, consumer choice, and education. So, Sam, let's start the discussion about what do you think, what should be the role of regulation in fixing the internet by blockchain or fixing the internet without blockchain? So how should regulators behave, governments behave in these days? If you speak about, we can speak about ICOs as well, yeah, but in general to use that kind of technology.
I think the first and most important thing is probably that regulators have to understand that the internet is global, right? So we live in a time where we have national jurisdictions or jurisdictions like the European Union. So we have laws that are valid in the European Union. And we have technology and companies that transact globally. Yeah, and at the beginning of the internet, Germany decided to give more weight to the national regulation, which resulted in, I say, n equals 1, yeah, resulted in almost no digital champion, right? Besides SAP, we have nothing. The United States decided to let it go in a certain way. It was a time where, I don't know why really, I don't know the history of that time, but for a certain reason, the United States decided not to look so deep into the Silicon Valley, right, what they're doing. There were data protection laws in the US. It's not that Facebook and Google, you know, were in a complete uncharted territory, but they were allowed to act as if. So what's the result? The result is where it was not heavily regulated, we have the big behemoths that we're talking about now, the champions, yeah? And there where we actually try to regulate with national laws, we have nothing, nada. So the question is, how can we find a way? We don't have any international institution that is, I don't know, working well to regulate. The United Nations has this kind of 5 Security Council with 5 nuclear powers that can veto everything. Yeah? Doesn't care, doesn't matter. And you have China and the US, so the probability is high it gets vetoed. Yeah? And you have the European Union that may get somewhere, but it's only Europe. Yeah? So the question is, I think the first question is, if you're talking about can regulators help or what should regulators do, is we need to understand as societies that we have to solve the problem that we have a global communication system, a global transaction system, and we don't have global regulation. And that is a challenge, right? We have to talk about. That's why many companies in the blockchain space are in countries that are not inside certain regulations, all right? I mean, EOS even went the way to found on the Caymans, I think, right? Another infrastructure kind of project. That's the one question. How do we handle a global technology, a global economy with jurisdictions that are not global? So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I think we need, at the moment, the only thing we can do is sandboxing, right? So we need our regulators, our governments to allow, to a certain degree, to do things that are not allowed, because we need them to understand better how to synchronize with reality. What I'm trying to say is, let's get out of digital for a second, because I think maybe that makes it easier. Take genetics, right? The gene manipulation. We in Europe, especially Germany, feel very strong about it. So we decided not to allow it at all in a certain way, to really heavily regulate it. I think it's a mistake. I think I don't buy any gene altered products. Never ever. But I think it's a mistake to not allow a solution where the technology, where the companies that deal with the technology can experiment and get on with it, right? So build factories, seal them off, let them do their stuff. Where's the problem, right? And maybe they find a solution for other regions or for us that will benefit us. So I think that there's, you know what I mean? So the saying no to a new technology, just completely saying no, isn't really helping, because everybody else around you will just go on, and you're disconnected. So sandboxing, allowing certain technologies to do certain things in a certain kind of time frame for certain kind of companies, I think would be a first step. I think Germany and especially the European Commission are concerning crypto, concerning blockchain. France is very open to ICOs, or trying to be very open to ICOs. Joe mentioned Switzerland, the Zug, we call it the crypto valley. So Zug and Liechtenstein are heavily, positioned to allow a lot of sandboxing or a lot of crypto blockchain-based companies. Singapore is setting up itself. Malta is trying to set up itself. Gibraltar, probably because of the Brexit, is also very keen on positioning itself. I don't know though what. Yeah, you have to decide for yourself. And so, I think that's what we need. One, we need as a societies to start pushing our governments to solve global regulation, because we need it if we want to regulate. And two is to push our own governments to allow sandboxing so companies can act without being illegal, right?
So, Joe, do you see any developments into any kind of global regulation for that kind of stuff?
Not anytime soon, no. So blockchain's a profound technology. It's going to enable us to reshape, re-architect many aspects of society over the next bunch of years. It's one of a number of exponential technologies that will do that. We are living life at an exponential pace, and it's, I think, probably everybody in this room feels that it's not common for otherwise linear thinking people to be overwhelmed with information and the pace of change. And those are people. People are relatively agile compared to institutions of people. And it's gonna take quite a while to figure out how society has these discussions, how society works through the implementation of these technologies in a way that's beneficial. There are many fronts on which that's being explored. There's money transmission issues. I think that's going to be complicated around the world for a while. I still expect that the use cases of cryptocurrencies will be powerful enough so that in many countries in the world they won't get shut down, and some countries have actual advantages to enabling those technologies. Different kinds of crypto assets implicate securities law, and in the United States we're getting towards pretty good clarity. In other regions, Singapore, Japan, Switzerland, different kinds of clarity, but reduction of uncertainty is what companies need in order to operate. So whatever the rules are, as long as you know that you're not going to get shut down or significantly punished, you can figure things out. In the U.S., the SEC's done tremendous work to understand the blockchain space, and about 3 months ago, Director Bill Hinman of Director of Corporate Finance there said about Ether that it was a decentralized token like Bitcoin. More importantly, They shared their understanding that there is this new kind of construct, essentially a protocol-based open platform or a networked business model where lots of different people and companies can get together and perform different roles. Those roles are glued together by business logic of a token, and if they merge a set of services or products, then that token can rise in value and everybody can benefit. It is different from a corporation in that you're not relying on a group of people to create a return on investment for you. You're actually participating in this system. So they don't consider that consumer utility token a security. So that's one avenue where I think the understanding, the efforts of regulators was really beneficial. There are going to be many more frontiers that we're going to explore over the next bunch of years that are enabled by this technology.
Thank you. If you stick for just a brief statement, perhaps, to this law topic, I know about another venture, so I don't want to speak too much about your ventures, but you have quite an impressive list of very, very strong ventures. You've got this one project, which is open law. Do you see that one pushing in that direction, or perhaps you can briefly explain about open law?
Sure. Open law is, again, a very profound project. It's gaining real-world traction right now. It enables you to create an agreement. It can have a legally enforceable agreement. It can be blockchain-based. You can have clauses that are written in prose in German or English. You can have clauses that are programs that exist on the blockchain. You can send money, escrow money into these living agreements. You can send data into these agreements. You can have clauses operate programmatically when certain conditions are met. So different counterparties can make an agreement. They can memorialize it on the blockchain and make it transparent for everybody to see if that is appropriate, or they can keep it off the blockchain, create a digital digest or a hash of it, and have the different counterparties sign that hash and timestamp it on the blockchain so that you can prove that that agreement existed and yet keep the terms private. So Open Law has partnered with Rocket Lawyer. It's a digital law company. They have 35 million customers. They're going to start using the open law technology to use these kinds of agreements to bring self-sovereign identity into the picture, reputation into the picture, arbitration systems into the picture. Open law itself is building its own platform. We live in a world of essentially subjective trust and implementation of societal rule systems by governments, top-down command and control, hierarchies. Sometimes that works out well, sometimes it doesn't work out so well. This technology enables automated trust, and open law is just one way of doing that. Essentially, any program on the blockchain can enable automated trust and can enable you to transact with people you don't know or don't trust or are competing with. You can build shared collaborative infrastructure that nobody can improperly manipulate, and you can create agreements at the corporate level, or you can create laws. You can build securities laws into trading infrastructure. You could potentially, at the nation-state level, you can create treaties. So it's been traditionally hard to enforce treaties without, shooting projectiles at one another and trying to do harm to one another. But if treaties are formed such that organization or nation states have to put up security bonds or other kinds of automated security bonds so that they can be punished if they transgress, that may be a better way to build agreements between nations.
Very interesting. So next is very much focusing on business. And now let's take the last minutes. So we have a little bit less than half an hour. Still missing questions from you, by the way. To speak about business blockchain for business, and so forth. So If I would ask you, Sam, privately, what was the topic we were most discussing about? I think it was exactly this, since we know each other. So let's take a look at the realm of enterprise blockchains, and you already, Joe, mentioned about permissioned private blockchain, but I want to start with Sam. How do you see blockchain in the enterprise world? Please give a brief statement, Sam.
That's hard. So generally, I'm torn. Yeah, I'm torn inside because of two things. One thing is what we freaks love about the blockchain is it creates a trust system, a trust layer, right? It takes away the need to have somebody that enables trust. If we take a private or enterprise blockchain controlled by one entity, we lose this technical trust layer actually normally. Yeah, so this is the one side. Yeah, which kind of, so it's just that you could just use your MySQL server, right? But on the other side, there are very, very different use cases, right? I like to mention the Deutsche Bahn, the German railway corporation. It has more than 1,000 limited companies, GmbHs, we say in German, limited entities inside the corporation. And these entities have to do business with each other and don't trust each other. For the Deutsche Bahn, it makes very much sense to use a controlled n equals 1 controlled blockchain inside the corporation, because these 1,000 limited companies have a transaction layer that they can trust. Yeah, which they don't have at the moment. They have a lot of disputes. Yeah? So that's where it can work. I think from my I said I'm more into ideology. From my point of view, I think to really get enterprise blockchains the power they need, you need systems that are used by everybody. It doesn't make sense if every company installs an own blockchain and keeps it for themselves. I don't believe in that system. I thought that the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance was a great idea, or is a great idea, because I can use a private Ethereum in my company and then connect to other Ethereum layers with other companies, or even the public blockchain. This is too technical, I know, sorry. And so, but that's a way to go. And the other thing is, which I think is actually the most interesting part, you know me, is the cooperative, right? So if companies come together and say, we want to use the blockchain technology, and let's use one infrastructure that we as companies use, and let's ensure that we run this infrastructure as companies. It's like a business public blockchain, yeah. And there is this one project, at least here in Germany now, called Even Network. I don't know if you heard about it, Joe. So I think it's the first one of that kind I know of, and I think that's the right way to go, so that businesses use one kind of business public blockchain, and internally they can do whatever they want, from MySQL server to private blockchains. But if they want to ensure trust in the supply chain, then this thing has to be distributed. That's my personal point of view. I'm not saying I'm correct. Yeah, I'm saying it's my my view.
I think you are correct. I think that's well said. It does depend on the use case, it depends on the context, and we'll still be building some centralized systems, certain situations when they're appropriate, and we can add value to certain systems by making them more decentralized as appropriate for that particular situation. At its core, blockchain is just a next generation database system. Enables, because of its architecture, enables greater trust in what's actually written and read from those databases. So you can look at a corporation as a microcosm of a society where you have lots of different groups, departments that all trust one another to a certain extent. They're all feeding from the same budget. They might want a system to track things and make sure that everybody is is playing fairly. Other situations like consortia can have lots of different organizations, again, build shared infrastructure amongst corporations that otherwise compete with one another but find good reasons to collaborate in shared trustworthy infrastructure. Supply chains or other kinds of value chains are another great use case where you can get rid of a lot of paperwork and have lots of different actors on the system with different agendas. So you may have a regulator on the system, you may have companies putting data into the system, and the regulator is in an adversarial role. So companies, it's much harder to cheat in real time. It's much easier to realize that something bad happened and you call the system administrator and you get some data removed from the database. So that's not really possible on blockchain systems. So, so there's so many great use cases for private permissioned blockchain. Public permissionless blockchain, at least in Ethereum and Bitcoin's case, are radically decentralized. And you need that sort of radical decentralization if you're going to put natively digital financial instruments and other sorts of things. So identity, you don't want a small group of actors being able to control or erase your identity. And so radically decentralized architectures, world computers like Ethereum will, I think, be the base infrastructure into which we'll layer on lots of less decentralized systems. And that's essentially how we're moving towards achieving scalability. Right now, Ethereum is the base layer, layer one. It doesn't process lots of transactions per second, but you get real trust. You can be pretty certain that nobody's going to be able to cheat that system. And many different projects, a lot of them are games or exchanges, are building at layer 2 of Ethereum, bringing their own scalability technology so that they can get hundreds and thousands of transactions per second. So there are other mechanisms for achieving scalability, but I think the architecture going forward is going to be hundreds or thousands of decentralized protocols for different sorts of things, storage, bandwidth, heavy compute, etc. And all linked together through or into this base trust layer, the radically decentralized layer.
So, first questions arrived. And surprisingly, the famous word is there as well, ICO. Let's start with this one. How to get rid of ICO scams?
Don't let any people exist.
Okay,
so this is, I mean, for thousands of years, people have been taking advantage of information asymmetries and trying to extract value from more naive people. It's exacerbated because of this technology, because of this technology. There's low barrier to entry to perpetrating one of these schemes. The context is global, so it can be really valuable, and the asymmetry is pretty overwhelming for a lot of people. You can create a scam ICO just by putting up a web page and putting up an Ether address or a Bitcoin address. We can take advantage of the low barrier to access information and the global context and build self-regulating systems so that we can build a database. We have a project called TrueSet that's building a database that will strongly suggest that if you're running a legitimate token launch that you disclose important things about that project, and hopefully it'll become a standard to do those things. We have another project called Frontier that's incentivizing analysts to surface their information. The SEC in the United States and other regulators around the world are ferreting out lots of bad projects, more so fraudulent projects, fraudulence that are breaking securities laws in different ways. And that's valuable. So it is useful to our ecosystem to have regulators police the really bad projects. Nobody in any country wants to kill blockchain. Well, some countries, no, that's so. some countries want to kill cryptocurrency, but no countries want to kill blockchain for their nation. And so what we've seen in the United States is the SEC making some very positive statements, first about Bitcoin, then Ether, then consumer utility tokens, and really saying, we're kind of open for business, but we've also for decades been enforcing securities law, and we think that's been really good for the economy and for consumer protection, and we're going to keep doing that. So I expect that there will be some sort of reckoning for projects that are on the wrong side of securities law. But we've already seen a chilling in the token launch space or the ICO space, where people are realizing that they should do their legal homework.
Okay, thank you. Sam, here's a question about one of the major causes for poverty anywhere in the world is corruption. How can blockchain help? Is there anything in work? So anything you know about how really corruption can be tackled by blockchain technology?
I mean, one of the ideas of the Sun protocol is that if you insert a blockchain system that is run by the people on a community level, on the smallest possible level, and then grow it up naturally, kind of natural decentralization from the bottom. If you have this transaction layer and people decide to use it to transact with others as well, everything is as transparent as you decide it to be. Yeah, so if you take the GIZ, for example, the German Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, so it's like the company of the German government that deals with the development programs of the German government in other countries, and especially in less prosperous countries. So they are heavily interested. They say in trade facilitation, and also in the fundings of these projects, of these development projects. Blockchain technology can create completely new cases of anti-corruption. What the UN did, for example, it's not really corruption, but what the UN did is it used an Ethereum, private Ethereum fork, a blockchain, to send money from the World Food Program to Jordan, to banks, and to 1 or 2 banks, and to 1 and 2 retailers, supermarkets, to allow Syrian refugees in Jordan to use this money, right? And to the identifier was their iris. So I was in Amman if you go there, every ATM, Bankautomat, has an iris scanner, so that the Syrian refugees can withdraw money with the iris scan from the UN money, right? And there's no bank anymore in between. And the UN said that the cost savings were 90%. 90%. And so I think there are many cases that will help end either corruption or overfeeing of services that we want solved. But it's obvious that if you have the blockchain system is per se transparent in a way, it's very hard to corrupt, yeah. And it's very hard, like Joe said, to change anything or to keep it, depending on how you set it up. But it's very hard to manipulate anything.
Yeah. So when you move money into refugee zones, there's a whole set of intermediaries, and it's typical that you lose about at least 30% of the money that is given at the origin. And so this is basically a tokenized system that skips over all the intermediaries and enables the supermarket essentially to get direct value.
Exactly, and they used to do accounting with Excel, right? So it was really hell for them to do the accounting with the banks, with the supermarkets, and now they all share one layer, one private blockchain of the UN, and everybody, the bank, the supermarket, and the UN, and the people know at any given time the same information, and so it just cuts out also the accounting costs. So it's yeah. So I think corruption can be easily dealt with technology-wise through the blockchain, but everywhere there are humans, there is corruption. All right. It's just you have to be honest, right? I think personally, corruption is something we use a lot without thinking about it. We are social beings, yeah, and our social because we are social beings, we are per se corrupt. If I have two agencies and I know one, yeah, people, and the difference is inside my contingency, yeah, 10, 20%. I will probably always go for the ones I know, and that is in a certain way already a level of corruption, a small level, yeah. But so that it's a very complex matter. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so the core of the technology enables the automation of trust, not the subjective implementation of trust, and you can set up agreements and guarantee that those agreements execute as they're set up.
But we learned as well, if we want to get rid of ICO scams and about corruption, we simply have to get rid of people. No? Okay, so one further question, perhaps my question concerning regulation was not the perfect one, came concerning regulation, especially to you, Joe. Who do you think should be in lead, who should initiate any activity concerning global regulation for blockchain? And do you have already started any initiatives in this direction?
Global regulation for blockchain.
Yeah.
I'm not
it's
sure.
An easy one.
I'm not sure we're ready to discuss global regulation for blockchain at this point.
Okay.
We're having trouble understanding it at various different national levels. So let's figure it out in a grassroots, decentralized fashion.
Okay. Good. Yeah, this is, I think, very honest statement, right? Yeah. Okay, once again, back to you, Sam. You said that you worry about the lack of big German tech companies now. Why to worry when, in the long run, it will probably produce same very good results? So there was a statement, okay, Germany is in a good shape, yeah, Germany. So if it is, for us, Germany is developing fine and so on, so why do we then need, is it the right understanding of the question? It came from over there? Anyway, yeah, so.
Yeah, it's always easy not to worry about food when you're fat. Huh? The problem comes when you don't have food and you're starting to lose weight and you're feeling that you're starving. I think that in all of the Western world, the societies unconsciously are feeling a shift in this digital revolution that we're having. And what they are feeling, they're not feeling comfortable with. That's why almost every single society of the West has voted for populist kind of politicians. Only Canada and France, where they have kind of, how you say, relatively moderate populists, yeah, with Macron and Trudeau. But everybody else is like going nuts, right? In terms of where we come from, or at least how I was raised, yeah? I was born and raised in Germany, and so, yeah, that maybe I'm influenced by that, of course. So, that's one thing. The other thing, the question, to answer the question, we have the automobile industry. We have the Maschinenbau, I don't know, construction, machine construction kind of industry, right? Those are the two big heavyweights of German economy, at least as I remember. I'm not sure. We also have tourism and other things that are working well. But if you look at automobile, we are building cars like hell, right? Everybody loves our cars. Trump is mad about it, right? But when these things start to drive themselves, we need 90% less. Full stop. If cars can run 90% of their time, if at the moment all our cars stand around most of the time, all right? So it's like assets we just put in the rain, and because it's status and everything. But as soon as that changes, as soon as these machines get autonomous, the idea will be that they should run as much as possible, which will mean that we will need fewer and fewer cars. And 90% is really bad. And then I'll stop. Electricity, right? The shift to electric cars like Tesla. It's not a coincidence that it's Tesla that is actually kind of kickstarted the whole electric thing. But I don't know the words, every word in English. Clutches, transmissions, Getriebe, Kupplungen. Yeah, we don't talk about how many jobs are in the automobile industry just for these kind of solutions that are not needed anymore in an electric car. They're just not existent. Huh?
So what you basically say in a world which is changing exponentially by technology, Germany needs to find their areas to become a digital champion as well, right?
Yes, I think we need to embrace change, and we need to find solutions how big corporations, how big organizations can innovate. Yeah.
Okay. So, last.
Can I say one more thing about
Yeah,
regulation?
Of course.
So, the blockchain technology is very, very young. Trying to freeze some aspect of it is going to be dangerous. It's important to understand that blockchain is just a technology. It's a next generation or breakthrough database technology. Nobody was trying to regulate Oracle databases or MySQL databases in the past, although governments have a right to regulate how people using those databases operate. So laws work reasonably well. Securities laws work reasonably well. They can be applied to things that people do on blockchain. Money transmission laws, they work reasonably well for the people that like them and like to apply them, and those can also be applied to blockchain. So regulating blockchain per se rather than specific uses of it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I think it was really a good further explanation. Thank you. So, closing question from my side to both of you. So, we are now somewhere at the edge that blockchain is very much discussed in all industries, basically, but it is not really in a breakthrough situation. Yeah. So, what do you think are the main challenges, the major challenges, or the key projects, or so on? Perhaps besides financial, where blockchain will evolve to a technology set which really changes the world. So
it is breaking through in many different niches on the corporate government side. We're building supply chain applications, and we have a few announcements. We're building platforms for old industries in commodities, trade, finance. We just announced the Comgo project, and there's a couple of weeks from now there's going to be another very exciting announcement in a very different kind of space. So it's definitely gaining traction on that side of things. On the public blockchain, the more grassroots, decentralized, disruptive application, there are hundreds or thousands of applications that are actually useful to a small subset of the population, and those things will continue to mature, and we're going to start building more applications that are more compelling to your more average consumer. But all of these different components are essentially fueling the development of the next component. So standards are being built on Ethereum for fungible tokens and non-fungible tokens, and atomic swap protocols, and decentralized exchanges, and parameterized insurance products, and naming services, etc. So this is all the infrastructure that we need to build to usher in the Web 3.0 economy.
Okay. Sam, with a special eye on the German market and a brief answer, what do you think will really... Germany is always, when new technology comes up, it's not a front runner, yeah? So we take a longer look and so on. So we have great projects, meanwhile, in Germany as well. So
Berlin's one of the highest energy hubs of blockchain in the world.
Yeah, but definitely. So it's really a hotspot, yeah? But if you look at the industries, where do you see the strongest movements for Germany?
I think, of course, if you talk about industries, it's two. It's the financial and it's supply chain. So the supply chain is, I think, one of the biggest cases, and third, I think it's for big corporations like Deutsche Bahn or TUI. I think did something real, actually, yeah, not a proof of concept, but actually a real system that is working to selling their beds inside the corporation, the hotel beds and things like that. So yeah, I think the supply chain logistics and supply chain will be very interesting. Finance and then from there on we have to see. The thing is, it's really for people and for companies. It's not about the technology. It's about the use case. It's about the benefit. Yeah, it's either cost reduction or higher somehow new markets. It's not about, they don't care what technology is right beneath it. Yeah, I think the highest benefits are in the moment in the supply chain organization.
Last question to you. How did you like Next and how did you like Hamburg?
Hamburg's really beautiful architecturally. It's I walked around a little bit yesterday. It's just amazing. And unfortunately, all I did at Next was listen to myself speak.
So just not so much surprises.
Yeah, a lot of appearances and interviews, etc. So I read the program, and it seems like a great conference. A lot of people understanding technology, critiquing technology, and trying to figure out how technology can better serve people. It's a great event.
So thank you very much to both of you for this great conversation. I really enjoyed it. So thank you for coming. Thank you for coming as well, of course.